He tried to drug me on our anniversary, so I swapped the glass with his own sister's. Isabella Turner stood by the window of her tiny Brooklyn apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars against the night sky. Tonight was supposed to be special, her 6th wedding anniversary with David. Ever since they tied the knot, things hadn't been perfect. David had become increasingly distant, his smiles less frequent, his words fewer than before. Yet, Isabella held on to the fragile hope that beneath the clouds of their struggles, love still quietly bloomed. At 29, Isabella was everything an everyday woman could be: hardworking, optimistic, and quietly resilient. She worked as a graphic designer in a small firm downtown, pouring creativity into her projects, dreaming of a brighter future where she and David could reclaim the happiness they'd once shared. But tonight, the city felt heavier, the air thicker, as though it foreshadowed the storm waiting at the restaurant they'd agreed to meet in. The restaurant was an upscale spot nestled between art galleries and coffee shops, a place David had insisted upon, a rare occasion that promised intimacy and warmth. A handful of family and close friends were invited, a small gathering, just enough to feel the comfort of support, but private enough to share memories and affection. Isabella arrived early, her fingers nervously tracing the delicate lace of her dress as she settled at the candlelit table. The soft clinking of glasses and faint jazz played in the background, setting a scene perfect for celebration. Yet as the minutes passed with no sign of David, a knot began to tighten in her stomach. When he finally appeared, he didn't smile. His face was pale, eyes darting around, as if searching for something or someone. "Sayan late," he muttered, sliding into the seat across from her. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the wine glasses already set in front of them. Isabella's heart fluttered with a mix of relief and unease. The man she once knew seemed swallowed by shadows she couldn't understand. When David poured her a glass of red wine, his gaze wavered, and a hesitation flickered in his eyes. Something felt off. Her instincts, sharpened over years of subtle disappointments, screamed a warning she couldn't ignore. Before she could process more, David leaned in, voice low, "Happy anniversary, Isa." But the warmth she expected was absent, replaced by a coldness that whispered secrets and lies. Without a word, Isabella lifted the glass to her lips, only to pause mid-sip. The taste was strange, bitter, unfamiliar. Panic prickled at her skin, heart pounding erratically. She quickly glanced at David, catching the telltale tremor of guilt masked poorly behind forced calm. His eyes, once soft for her, hardened, narrowing into something sharp and calculating. The moment cracked open like fragile glass. David muttered under his breath, "You're too naive, always so trusting." The words, barely audible to others, cut deeper than any shouted insult. Isabella's cheeks flushed, tension radiating from every fiber of her being. The friends nearby exchanged uneasy glances, some shocked, others confused. Was this just a marital spat? Or was something darker unfolding? Isabella's mind raced. How had the man she loved turned into someone so cold, so cruel? As whispers of suspicion began to circulate around the table, she realized the betrayal wasn't just in his words, but in the silence of those watching, uncertain where to stand. Her world tightened, constricting around her like a vice. The wine glass wobbled in her grip, her breath shallow as humiliation seeped through her skin, turning the room into a stage where she was both actress and victim. The elegant setting now felt suffocating, the faces around her blurs of judgment and disbelief. But somewhere beneath the pain, a spark remained, a flicker of defiance, fragile yet resilient. Isabella knew this was no ordinary note. What started as a celebration was about to confront her with a truth so bitter it could break her or set her free. And in that silence, as David's betrayals hovered in the air, Isabella's silent vow began to take form. She would no longer be the one crushed beneath the weight of broken promises. The whispered accusations hung heavy in the air after David's biting words. Isabella's eyes searched the familiar faces around the table, hoping to find even one ally, but instead she was met with stunned silence and subtle shifts in posture. The warmth that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, uncomfortable tension. David's smirk grew, fueled by the power he thought he now held, his demeanor arrogant and almost smug. The people who had once seemed like friends now seemed poised on the edge, hesitant to intervene, uncertain where their loyalties should lie. David's voice dropped to a venomous whisper, just loud enough for Isabella to hear. "You don't deserve any of this." His words were meant to wound, to shrink her into submission, to break her down in front of others, as if anyone would believe the narrative he spun, painting her as fragile, naive, and unworthy. The betrayal stung. But what hurt even more was the public spectacle, to be degraded on a night that was supposed to be about love, a night meant to celebrate their union. Isabella's face flushed hot with humiliation. Her breath hitched, and for a moment she felt paralyzed, caught in a whirlwind of disbelief and sorrow. The quietness around her, the hesitation of those seated near her, amplified the weight of David's cruelty. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs, the sting of tears brimming behind her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. Not here, not yet. But despite the whirlpool of emotions inside, Isabella's mind sharpened. Beneath the chaos and humiliation, a burning clarity began to form. This was more than an emotional outburst. David was using the evening to manipulate, to cover his own secrets. Her instincts screamed that there was something darker lurking beneath his bitter words, something he didn't want anyone to uncover. Rachel, David's younger sister, had arrived quietly during the tense moments at the table. She had slipped in unnoticed by most, but not by Isabella, whose eyes caught Rachel's watchful gaze. The sister's expression was unreadable, a mixture of curiosity and concern etched across her face. As David continued his cold tirade, Rachel sat stiffly beside him, avoiding eye contact, but clearly uncomfortable with the mounting tension. Isabella found herself considering the possibility that Rachel could be the key to unraveling the mystery shadowing this night. Though surrounded by people, Isabella felt a sharp loneliness. No one stepped forward, no one defended her. Friends shifted uncomfortably, some casting furtive glances at the door, others at their phones, unable or unwilling to break the silence. She swallowed down the lump rising in her throat, but the humiliation was slowly, painfully sinking into her bones. This was a moment she'd never forget, not for the love celebrated, but for the brutal exposure of betrayal. Her phone vibrated softly against the table, a small, inconsequential sound that seemed almost surreal amid the heavy atmosphere. She glanced down to see a message from an old friend. "Remember your worth, Isa. You deserve better." The brief message ignited a fragile spark inside her, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone, that somewhere beyond the suffocating walls of this restaurant, people cared. Isabella took a deep breath, steadying herself. The room was heavy with judgment, but she reminded herself that humiliation was a transient blade. It could hurt, dare even to shame, but it couldn't define her, not if she refused to let it. As David's eyes pinned her with cold distaste, she silently vowed not to be crushed beneath his cruelty. The night was far from over. The shadows behind David's facade had yet to fully reveal themselves. Yet, in this moment of public degradation, Isabella's resolve quietly hardened. She would find the strength to fight back, not with bitterness, but with clarity and courage. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope flickering in the unlikeliest of places. The presence of Rachel, a sister caught between loyalty and truth, and the faint whisper of support from a friend who reminded her she was more than the worst moment of her life. If you've ever felt the stings of betrayal, the sharp edge of humiliation in a place that should have been safe, hold on. There's strength in the silent battles we fight within ourselves. Isabella's story is just beginning, and her journey to reclaim dignity and justice is about to take a turn you won't see coming. In the days following that fateful anniversary dinner, Isabella found herself trapped in a storm of conflicting emotions. Returning to the quiet apartment she shared with David felt like stepping into a void, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoing with cold silences and unspoken suspicions. The cozy corners that once held whispered promises now bore the weight of unspoken truths. Each morning, she stared into the bathroom mirror, searching for strength in the reflection staring back at her. The vivid blush of humiliation still burned faintly on her cheeks, a cruel reminder of the night's pain. She grappled with the gnawing doubt. Was she mistaken about David's intentions? Was there any truth to his words? Self-blame whispered dangerously at the edges of her mind, threatening to erode her confidence. Yet another tide she struggled to swim against. Trying to reclaim control, Isabella immersed herself in work, channeling her emotions into design projects that demanded her creativity and precision. The vibrant colors and bold shapes on her screen became a refuge from the turbulence inside. Yet the ghosts of the past lingered, shadowing her focus, blurring the lines between personal grief and professional ambition. She sought solace in conversations with old friends, hesitating before recounting the story. Some listened with quiet sympathy, others with skeptical detachment. A few offered the barest whispers of advice, urging her to confront David, to demand the truth, while others simply reminded her to keep her head up. But her heart cried out for more than words. She needed clarity, justice, some flicker of hope to pierce the darkness. David remained elusive. His phone calls came infrequently, his explanations vague and rehearsed. When they did speak, he skirted around accusations, casting blame elsewhere or withdrawing into silence. The walls between them thickened, and Isabella's doubts deepened. She tried to hold on to the hope that he could change, that their marriage wasn't a lost cause, but each interaction chipped away at that fragile belief. One evening, as rain streaked down the windows, she found herself seated across from Rachel at a quiet cafe. The younger sister exuded a calm that contrasted sharply with the storm inside Isabella. Rachel listened intently as Isabella hesitated, then shared fragments of the night's horrors. The whispered insults, the suspicious drink, the sting of betrayal. Rachel's eyes flickered with a complex mix of guilt and resolve. "I've seen sides of David he doesn't show anyone," she confessed quietly. "Things he's hiding. You're not imagining it. He's tangled in something dangerous." Her admission was a revelation, but also a chilling confirmation of Isabella's worst fears. The sisters, connected by blood but isolated by secrets, formed an unspoken alliance. Rachel's revelations opened a door to truths long buried and hinted at shadows looming larger than Isabella had imagined. Yet the path ahead was anything but clear. How could she reclaim agency in a marriage slowly unraveling before her? What risks awaited her if she dared to challenge David's facade? In the days that followed, Isabella grappled with paralysis and determination in equal measure. Each attempt to confront David was met with evasion or placated with empty promises. Small setbacks piled up, missed calls, cold shoulders, carefully constructed lies. But beneath the setbacks, there were flickers of hope. Rachel's quiet support, the unwavering encouragement from old friends, the clarity burning brighter within her. Isabella began to sense that this wasn't just about a husband's betrayal. It was a test of her strength, a crucible forging a new version of herself. She clung to the fragile fragments of courage sprouting within, uncertain of the path, but unwilling to return to submission. Every night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling's shadows, she whispered to herself, "This isn't the end. There's a way forward," even if she couldn't see it yet. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet resolve began to bloom. A promise she silently made to herself. No longer would she be a victim of David's darkness. The road ahead was blurred in fog and doubt, but Isabella was ready to face it, prepared to find the strength to reclaim her dignity, no matter the cost. And if you have ever felt trapped in a situation where every step forward is met with resistance, remember, the smallest glimmer of hope can ignite the fiercest fire within. Hold on to that light, because sometimes all it takes is one spark to change everything. Days bled into weeks, and Isabella found herself sinking deeper into a nightmarish spiral. The layers of deception buried beneath her once hopeful marriage unfurled with ruthless precision, exposing betrayals so raw that her very identity seemed to unravel. David's absence became a dark stain on her reality, his excuses growing thinner, his eyes colder whenever they met. The veneer of normalcy cracked, revealing a man she barely recognized, a stranger cloaked in bitterness and manipulation. Then came the phone call that shattered the final shard of trust she had clung to. A terse, veiled conversation between David and someone on the other end, where the mention of money, debts, and avoidance hung heavy, a whisper of criminal dealings tangled with the name Rachel, David's sister, who until then had been an ambiguous figure, equally a source of comfort and confusion. Fear knotted in Isabella's stomach as the puzzle pieces abruptly aligned. David's plan wasn't just about them. It was far more insidious, involving secrets that could destroy their family and leave her a collateral casualty. One fraught evening, Isabella's fragile world crumbled entirely. She'd agreed to another dinner, this time at David's insistence, hoping for reconciliation, or at least clarity. The restaurant was dimly lit, the clinking of cutlery and quiet murmur creating a deceptive calm. David arrived late, his eyes avoiding hers, fingers twitching nervously. Isabella's promise to herself to face the night with strength faltered as David's cold tone shattered the fragile peace. "You've been a burden," he spat quietly, eyes flashing venom. "Always naive, always blind. I was only waiting for the right moment to get rid of it all, even of you." The words landed like heavy stones, smashing the fragile hope within her. His cruel tone turned to a smirk, a predator savoring his power. Before she fully grasped his meaning, David lifted a glass of red wine toward her, a gesture laced with hidden intent. Isabella's breath caught as suspicion blossomed into certainty. The memories of that night 6 weeks prior rushed back. The strange taste, the weight of betrayal. Her heart pounded violently, instincts screaming danger. But she played along, carefully feigning ignorance as her fingers brushed beneath the table, swapping the glasses without a second thought. The shuffle was swift and precise, an act born not of desperation, but of sharpened resolve. At that moment, the door opened, and Rachel stepped in, her face pale but determined. Her eyes locked on David with a mix of accusation and sorrow. The room held its breath as Rachel approached the table, voice steady but heavy. "David, you don't get to keep hiding. I know what you've been trying and failing to cover up." Gasps rippled through the intimate crowd. The tension crackled, thick and electric. Rachel's words peeled back layers of deception, exposing David's attempts to escape debts and manipulate family connections, using everyone, including Isabella, as pawns. The quiet murmurs of the onlookers shifted swiftly, disbelief morphing into shock and then indignation. David's confidence crumbled, flicker of panic replacing arrogance. His face paled as Rachel's presence illuminated his betrayal. Isabella, feeling the tide turn, met David's gaze not with fear, but with fierce clarity. The humiliation of past weeks condensed into a single, defiant moment of triumph, not because of cruelty, but because of truth finally revealed. Yet this was only the beginning of a reckoning, a climax that forced everyone to choose sides. As eyes lingered between Isabella and David, the fragile facade of their marriage shattered like broken glass. Isabella stood, not just as a woman wronged, but as a beacon of resilience, a testament to the strength found in the face of treachery. To anyone watching this silent battle unfold, the lesson was clear. Humiliation can leave scars, but it does not define us. When truth surfaces, the power to reclaim one's dignity becomes not just possible, but inevitable. And for Isabella, the night heralded a turning point. The abyss she once feared no longer felt like a prison, but the forge where a new, stronger self would be born. If you find yourself lost in moments of despair, remember that even the darkest nights can give way to dawn. There is power in standing tall when it seems the ground beneath you has crumbled. The challenge is not in never falling, but in rising every single time. In the days that followed that shattering dinner, Isabella retreated into a quiet sanctuary of reflection. The world outside continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the storm of revelations swirling within her. Yet inside, a transformation began to take root, a slow, steady awakening beneath the bruises of betrayal. She spent hours poring over every detail of the past weeks, analyzing conversations, moments, and gestures that hadn't made sense before. Pieces she once dismissed as inconsequential clicked into place like a hidden puzzle. The truth was clearer now. David's duplicity extended far beyond their fractured marriage. There were debts, hidden transactions, and manipulations woven into the fabric of their family life. Threads pulled taut, threatening to unravel everything Isabella thought she knew. One afternoon, while sifting through a box of old letters and documents tucked away in the attic, she found a receipt that stirred old doubts anew, a large sum withdrawn from their joint account days before the anniversary dinner. The handwriting was unmistakably David's, but the destination raised questions. An untraceable address in another state, linked to a shadowy account. Her hands trembled, but her resolve solidified. If David had been planning to escape, she needed to be prepared, to expose not just his betrayal, but the full extent of his schemes. Amid this growing knowledge, Isabella's relationship with Rachel deepened. The younger sister, once a distant and ambiguous figure, revealed herself as an unexpected ally. Rachel, too, was caught between loyalty to her brother and the harsh truths that threatened to fracture her own identity. Over quiet talks and shared secrets, an unspoken bond formed, a pact to stand together against the darkness David had hidden for so long. Rachel's quiet strength was a beacon that illuminated Isabella's path. She spoke honestly about her fears and frustrations, but also about the necessity of confronting uncomfortable realities. "We can't change what's been done," Rachel confessed, "but we can decide how we respond. This is our chance to rewrite the story." Inspired but cautious, Isabella began to craft a plan, one that didn't rely on impulsive reactions or blind vengeance, but on patience, clarity, and gathering allies. She reached out to a trusted lawyer, discreetly seeking advice on protecting herself legally and financially. She documented every conversation, saving messages, keeping a meticulous record of events. Each step was a small victory, a reclaiming of control in a situation that had seemed utterly uncontrollable. Yet the emotional toll was undeniable. There were nights when exhaustion overwhelmed her, when the weight of solitude pressed down. Doubts whispered insidiously. Was she strong enough to endure what was coming? Could she confront David without losing herself? The path forward was blurred by uncertainty. But Isabella learned to steady her breath, to center herself in the knowledge that she was not alone. Surrounding herself with old friends and new allies, gathering courage from their encouragement and her own growing clarity, Isabella began to see a future beyond the shadows. It was a future not defined by the pain inflicted upon her, but by the strength she found in rising above it. Little by little, the puzzle pieces fell into place, revealing a roadmap through the chaos, a path toward truth, justice, and ultimately, liberation. For anyone who has ever felt overwhelmed by deception or betrayal, Isabella's journey offers a powerful reminder. Clarity comes not by ignoring the darkness, but by facing it with courage and deliberate action. The road may be steep, the nights long, but with resolve and support, the possibility of new beginnings always exists, waiting just beyond the horizon. In the quiet corners of her heart, Isabella knew one thing for certain. This was no longer about what David had done. It was about who she would become. And, for the first time in months, hope began to bloom anew. The turning point came unexpectedly, like a sudden crack of thunder, on an otherwise gray day. Isabella had arranged to meet Rachel at a secluded coffee shop nestled between two bustling art studios in Brooklyn. The air was thick with the scent of freshly ground coffee and the faint hum of whispered conversations. Rachel arrived looking tense but determined, clutching a manila envelope filled with documents that promised to change everything. "This is it," she said. Rachel said quietly as she slid the envelope across the table. Inside were bank statements, email exchanges, and evidence of transactions that painted a damning picture of David's attempts to conceal debts and launder money through family accounts. Isabella's eyes scanned the pages, heart pounding with a volatile mixture of fear and relief. The proof was undeniable, but the revelation carried more than just financial implications. It exposed a web of lies that had ensnared not only her, but many in their circle. Rachel confessed she had been torn between protecting her brother and protecting the truth, but the guilt had become unbearable. "He tried to drug you, Isa. He planned it all," Rachel whispered hoarsely. "He thought if the truth came out, he'd be free. But now it's time to bring everything into the light." The next steps were as daunting as they were necessary. Armed with evidence and bolstered by Rachel's unexpected alliance, Isabella took her revelations to a trusted attorney who specialized in criminal and family law. The meetings that followed were intense and exhausting, but empowering. She learned the mechanisms to protect herself legally, how to safeguard her finances, and most importantly, how to rebuild her life on her terms. Isabella also decided to confront David publicly, not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet strength of truth. At a carefully planned family gathering, initially meant as a peacemaking opportunity, Isabella stood firm in the center of the room. With Rachel beside her, she presented the facts, letting the weight of evidence speak louder than words. Gasps echoed as the crowd absorbed the depth of betrayal. David's face drained of color. His facade of control evaporated in an instant. Friends and relatives who had once hesitated to choose sides now recoiled in shock. The air was dense with disbelief, but also with a growing sense of justice. The man once seen as a charming husband and brother was unveiled as a deceptive manipulator. Isabella's composure was unshakable. Her voice was steady and clear, resonating with calm conviction. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about recognizing that no one should be hidden behind lies, not even family. We owe ourselves the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful." David's attempts to deny or deflect crumbled under the mounting pressure. The walls he had built around himself collapsed, isolating him as his support network fractured. This shift was more than personal vindication. It was a powerful testament to the strength that comes from exposing darkness with light. Though the road ahead promised ongoing challenges, Isabella knew she had reclaimed her power. She was no longer a victim silenced by fear, but a woman whose dignity openly challenged deceit. If you ever face overwhelming betrayal, remember, the courage to seek truth and forge alliances can be your greatest weapon. Isabella's story teaches us that even the deepest wounds can lead to renewal when met with unwavering resolve and unexpected solidarity. As she stepped forward that day, shoulders squared and eyes shining with quiet determination, Isabella embodied a timeless lesson that justice, when pursued with heart and clarity, can break chains and reveal the path to freedom. And sometimes, those you least expect become the allies who help you write the next chapter of your life. If you've ever felt lost or powerless, take heart. Help can come in the most surprising forms. The room was thick with tension as Isabella stood tall, surrounded by family and friends whose eyes darted anxiously between her and David. The air was heavy, charged with disbelief and whispered speculation. No one expected the calm, unwavering strength she radiated, so different from the vulnerable woman they had seen unravel over the past weeks. Tonight, Isabella was reclaiming her narrative, rewriting the ending on her own terms. David's attempt to dismiss the evidence collapsed under the weight of Rachel's unwavering testimony and the undeniable documents Isabella had gathered. His defenses crumbled, his voice faltering as the gaze of those once loyal to him shifted into something colder. Disappointment, betrayal, and ultimately, rejection. Friends who had turned their backs when the whispers began now stood visibly uncomfortable, their silence deafening. With every detail Isabella shared, the betrayal, the deceit, the cold manipulation, her voice grew stronger, fueled by the truth she wielded like a shield. The humiliation she endured was no longer a chain, but a catalyst, forging a new version of herself. She looked David in the eye, declaring, "I refuse to be diminished by your lies any longer. This family deserves honesty, and I will not let you hide in shadows." As the room absorbed her words, a wave of emotions covered the faces around her. Shock mingled with relief, sorrow entwined with newfound respect. Some whispered apologies, others averted their eyes, burdened by the sudden clarity. David's power evaporated in that space, leaving him exposed and isolated. Isabella's victory wasn't just the exposure of a husband's betrayal. It was the public reclaiming of her dignity and agency. The crowd witnessed a woman who had been pushed to the brink and emerged unbroken, her spirit fierce. She didn't need to shout or demand vengeance. Her strength spoke in the quiet confidence that radiated from every pore. The consequences for David were swift. Business connections severed, family ties frayed, and legal consequences looming as Isabella's attorney mobilized the evidence to protect her rights and seek accountability. The man who tried to escape responsibility now faced the full weight of truth. But beyond the tangible outcomes, the most profound change was Isabella's transformation. She had stepped out of the shadows cast by betrayal and into the light of self-respect and empowerment. Each step forward was no longer dictated by fear, but by possibility. This moment reshaped not only the family dynamic, but also the community that had watched from the sidelines. Conversations shifted. Perspectives changed. People began to see the importance of standing with those who face injustice, of listening to victims, and of recognizing the strength in vulnerability. Isabella's journey was more than personal, it was universal. It was a testament to the resilience that lies within when darkness threatens to consume. Her rise invited others to believe that justice is attainable, not through retaliation, but through courage, truth, and quiet determination. To everyone who feels unseen or unheard in the face of betrayal, Isabella's story shines as a beacon. Your dignity, your voice, and your strength are your greatest tools in rewriting your story. No matter how deep the wound, the power to rise remains within. In that room, as the heavy silence finally gave way to tentative support, Isabella knew she had become more than a survivor. She had become an emblem of triumph, and that was the most powerful victory of all. The turning point came unexpectedly, like a sudden crack of thunder on an otherwise gray day. Isabella had arranged to meet Rachel at a secluded coffee shop nestled between two bustling art studios in Brooklyn. The air was thick with the scent of freshly ground coffee and the faint hum of whispered conversations. Rachel arrived looking tense but determined, clutching a manila envelope filled with documents that promised to change everything. "This is it," Rachel said quietly as she slid the envelope across the table. Inside were bank statements, email exchanges, and evidence of transactions that painted a damning picture of David's attempts to conceal debts and launder money through family accounts. Isabella's eyes scanned the pages, heart pounding with a volatile mixture of fear and relief. The proof was undeniable, but the revelation carried more than just financial implications. It exposed a web of lies that had ensnared not only her, but many in their circle. Rachel confessed she had been torn between protecting her brother and protecting the truth, but the guilt had become unbearable. "He tried to drug you, Isa. He planned it all," Rachel whispered hoarsely. "He thought if the truth came out, he'd be free. But now it's time to bring everything into the light." The next steps were as daunting as they were necessary. Armed with evidence and bolstered by Rachel's unexpected alliance, Isabella took her revelations to a trusted attorney who specialized in criminal and family law. The meetings that followed were intense and exhausting, but empowering. She learned the mechanisms to protect herself legally, how to safeguard her finances, and most importantly, how to rebuild her life on her terms. Isabella also decided to confront David publicly, not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet strength of truth. At a carefully planned family gathering, initially meant as a peacemaking opportunity, Isabella stood firm in the center of the room. With Rachel beside her, she presented the facts, letting the weight of evidence speak louder than words. Gasps echoed as the crowd absorbed the depth of betrayal. David's face drained of color, his facade of control evaporated in an instant. Friends and relatives who had once hesitated to choose sides now recoiled in shock. The air was dense with disbelief, but also with a growing sense of justice. The man once seen as a charming husband and brother was unveiled as a deceptive manipulator. Isabella's composure was unshakable. Her voice was steady and clear, resonating with calm conviction. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about recognizing that no one should be hidden behind lies, not even family. We owe ourselves the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful." David's attempts to deny or deflect crumbled under the mounting pressure. The walls he had built around himself collapsed, isolating him as his support network fractured. This shift was more than personal vindication. It was a powerful testament to the strength that comes from exposing darkness with light. Though the road ahead promised ongoing challenges, Isabella knew she had reclaimed her power. She was no longer a victim silenced by fear, but a woman whose dignity openly challenged deceit. If you ever face overwhelming betrayal, remember, the courage to seek truth and forge alliances can be your greatest weapon. Isabella's story teaches us that even the deepest wounds can lead to renewal when met with unwavering resolve and unexpected solidarity. As she stepped forward that day, shoulders squared and eyes shining with quiet determination, Isabella embodied a timeless lesson that justice, when pursued with heart and clarity, can break chains and reveal the path to freedom. And sometimes those you least expect become the allies who help you write the next chapter of your life. If you've ever felt lost or powerless, take heart. Help can come in the most surprising forms.